A lot of breaking news on student athletes as employees. Let's get into the details.
The big business of college athletics is always in the news, so we're back on the big mountain to keep you updated.
It changes every day, Steve. If you're new to the mountain, I'm JY. This is my good friend Steve, but this is craziness. Every day we're getting new news about the NIL, about student athletes, about NLRB, all that kind of stuff. I do want to give an update to the NLRB versus USC Pac-12 and NCAA. We did our first real main episode on that just a couple days ago. I also want to talk about this Dartmouth case that just hit, and briefly about the Tennessee issues that are ongoing. I first need to give a massive shout out and props to Amanda Kristovich, one of the only reporters really covering this stuff. And I just have to give her a lot of props on this. It's astonishing that there's not more news agencies covering these sorts of things, but she's on top of it. Massive shout out to her. Thank you very much. And she's just doing a great job on this.
Yeah, if this is a topic you're interested in, follow her on Twitter. She really is the only reporter that's actually out there reporting. A lot of people out there are just retweeting her information.
Yes.
She is on the ground, attending these hearings. Yeah. She's great, so find her on Twitter. I think she works for, it's FOS?
Yes.
I forget what it stands for.
I forget what it stands for, too.
Great reporter. She mentioned the other day that she might have to go to law school now because of this, so maybe we can ride along with her, do an online law school or something.
I love it. Yeah. Let's do that. Well, let's get into the first big headline, probably the biggest one of this week, and that was the Dartmouth ruling. So, big headline Monday, February 5th, as a regional office of the National Labor Relations Board rules that Dartmouth men's basketball players are employees of the college. Dartmouth spokesperson said in a statement that the college firmly believes that the unionization is not appropriate in this instance, and that they will be seeking a review of this decision. It certainly looks as if the college is going to be appealing the decision of this regional regional office. Two player representatives, both of the class of 2025, stated they were proud of the ruling. They see it as a significant step forward for college athletes. This ruling means that players can vote on whether or not to unionize. Players do say that they plan to do this and begin an Ivy League Basketball Players Association. Moving forward, the decision will be reviewed by the national office as well as by the full Labor Relations Board. If you remember back in 2015, and you stated this, Steve, on our last episode, Northwestern football players were actually declared employees by a different regional board at the time. However, the full Labor Relations Board declined to rule on that matter at the time. It appears right now they're definitely going to have a second chance, and as we get into these others, a second, third, fourth, fifth chance, because these are all over the place. So anything on the Dartmouth situation here before we move to the USC Pac situation?
Yeah, so I would just, the few key points, like you mentioned, the Northwestern case, so far this has gone very similar. Mm-hmm. Now what I will say is we're 10 years removed from that case. Just the whole environment is a lot different.
Yes.
Supreme Court rulings have come out since then. So we'll see. But we're really basically in that same place where the local regional labor board rules in favor of them, but it's got to go and be basically ratified or upheld by the national, by NLRB. So, more to come on that. Now, one thing that's really important, and I don't think a lot of media, major media is covering this or making the distinction. I don't think a lot of fans know.
Yeah.
So Dartmouth is a private Ivy League school. Mm-hmm. The only reason that the NLRB can even take their case is because they are a private school. So any rulings they make there will not necessarily carry over to public schools. Every state has different rules about public unions and public employees. So just something to keep in mind, something that happens at a small private Ivy League school. It is huge. It's news.
Yes.
But people shouldn't assume that same ruling will carry over to Penn State,
right.
Michigan, New Mexico, UCLA, whatever. So that's just something to keep in mind with these. So there's going to be a lot to work out. So if we have one case that's goes a certain way, everyone needs to be very cautious to assume that that means that all nationwide, all college athletes are now employees suddenly.
Employees and have a right to unionize.
Yes.
So they may be employees, or most of them will be, but the unionization of them could be very much different state to state.
Could be.
So let's move to the case that we, again, just hit on. There's a little bit of an update here. As I said, we didn't have reporting when we did that last episode on the NLRB versus USC, Pac-12, NCAA. Again, thanks to Amanda, we did get a little bit more of an update as to this second hearing, so I want to bring everybody up to speed and also where things potentially are going to be heading after that. So the testimonies continued. They mentioned Paul Perrier, who I mentioned on the last episode, Ryan Cohen, Denise Kwok, were all called as witnesses. Basically, according to the reporting, all three seem to claim kind of ignorance as to several college knowledge rules. Just kind of, I don't know that, right? And I mentioned one of the, like, he literally was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, it seems odd that they wouldn't know, some of these people wouldn't know these things, but that's what they say. After the NLRB then rested their case, the judge heard a motion to dismiss the case. This was denied by the judge, but the judge did question why the Pac-12 should remain as a respondent to this case since USC is now moving to the Big Ten. So she did bring that up. Nothing ruled on that, but just kind of asked the questions. When USC was then called some of their witnesses, one witness actually contradicted pretty much everybody else. Joseph Wood stated that USC did communicate rules to the athletes. So we were in our previous episode, they didn't state rules, they just said expectations of their athletes. He did use the word rules on certain things. His testimony actually was more consistent with the two former players' testimony than it was with the other witnesses that work for USC. While the NLRB has publicly stated they feel they are in an extremely strong position in this case. Again, could this be a similar type of deal where the regional decides one thing, it then has to go to the national, and we'll see what happens with that. Moving forward then, the trial is going to reconvene on February 26th. This is when USC will continue their testimony and anything they want to present. It'll then move to the PAC if there's anything they want to present, and then the NCAA if there's anything that they want to present their defenses and whatnot. The trial could then continue into a fifth month, and that would be about mid-April after, March Madness and all that kind of stuff. I would guess it probably is at this point. I mean, they were hoping all of the defenses would be heard in this hearing that we just had. They only got into about half of the USC defenses. So I see this going at least until April probably. So we'll see where we're at on this. This is going to draw out. All indications are this is headed in a very similar path that the Dartmouth case was headed. Different regional court, but it seems very strong that the NRLB is going to rule in favor of these past, or in favor of the NLRB, I should say. The judge is going to rule in favor of the NLRB. So anything on that, and then I just want to real quick hit on the Tennessee situation.
Real quick thought on USC is their entire defense seems to be to play dumb.
Yes.
Because I really feel like they are in a position where they know that if they argue this on just merits alone, that they're going to lose. Seems pretty obvious to them and everybody else. So they kind of have to, well, we don't know that. We don't know if that's a rule or that's an expectation.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure if they would get kicked off the team if they stop coming to practice. Okay. And I'm not sure if they would lose their scholarship if this happens, So I think their whole strategy is just to play dumb. And in 2024, I don't think that's going to work anymore.
Right.
It might have worked in 2014 because people had certain expectations. So that's really my only thought on that. But I will have some thoughts on the Tennessee and Virginia case.
Yeah, I'm just real quick. I want to bring up one thing with it, and then I'll go right to your thoughts. But so in that Tennessee NIL case, the judge denied a TRO, and I think some people were like, "Oh, what happened there? He denied this." Timeout, not necessarily the case. He denied a TRO only because the harm caused to these athletes would have been monetary in nature. It's not irreparable harm. And the threshold you have to get to for any sort of restraining order, temporary, permanent, whatever the case may be, is something more than a monetary damage. It has to be irreparable harm and whatnot. And he basically is like, no, it's going to be monetary, meaning they need to be paid for their services.
Right.
He actually went on then and says and wrote, it appears that the NCAA violates antitrust laws. So he's kind of in denying the TRO, saying, yeah, I'm denying it because it is monetary. And we're going to get to that whenever he makes his ruling, but at this point he denied the TRO. So I just wanted to make sure that that piece was clarified for some people. I don't know if there's confusion on, he denied it or denied the case, if they're not understanding what that means. So I did want to make that clarification for anyone. What do you got on this case?
So, yeah, I have a couple big thoughts on this.
Okay.
First of all, we just recently did an episode about will the NCAA exist in 2030? Okay. So I gave Charlie Baker credit for trying to come up with this plan. There's been a little pushback from the Big Ten and the SEC. Maybe they want to go beyond his plan, but at least he was kind of getting the conversation going and having the NCAA participate in this instead of, fighting against it. And then we have a scenario where they come out and the NCAA comes out and they start hammering multiple different schools for NIL violations. I get it. They're supposed to be a rules enforcement body, but here's the thing. They were so far behind on this NIL stuff, they had to respond to, changing state laws, court cases, and basically just at one point just threw open the doors and said, literally one of their statements was, follow your own state laws on NIL. So, they basically opened the floodgates on this. They tried to, once the floodgates are open, they tried to kind of close it back in a little bit. And here's the thing. I really believe almost every Division I college and university across the country, if they're engaging in NIL in any way, they would be in violation, if you looked closely enough, in the current NCAA rules, because the current NCAA rules are so ambiguous. They were thrown together shoddily at the last minute, and in some cases clearly violate state and federal laws. Like, if you're running a public university and you have a state or federal law and you have an NCAA regulation and they seem to be acting against each other, conflicting, and that everybody else is basically ignoring that, why are you going to put yourself in a position where you are potentially helping break state and federal laws just to comply with this NCAA rule that everyone else is breaking anyways?
Sure.
So they didn't need to do this, honestly. They could have just said, hey, let's let this NIL thing play out. Let's look at the normal stuff that we focus on, like, players or teams putting coaches in disguise and sending them to other team sidelines, Instead of focusing on the stuff they already had on their plate, they said, you know what, let's go put the ban, let's try and drop the hammer on some teams. I think Florida was the first one, Tennessee. It's so stupid. Again, they stepped in it again. Like, they didn't need to do this, and this could be the case that brings the whole damn shebang down. You have two, and people should be clear, this is not the University of Tennessee, University of Virginia, University of Florida, whatever, suing the NCAA. This is the state's attorneys general of Tennessee and Virginia suing the NCAA for federal antitrust violations. This is the exact case that Brett Kavanaugh and Gorsuch warned them. The next time you come into our court, this Supreme Court, we are going to tear you apart and make it so you don't exist anymore if this comes back to the Supreme Court again. And they're like, let's do it again. Let's throw our hat in the ring again. They did this to themselves. They didn't need to do it. It's stupid. And if this ends up being the case that brings the whole thing down, they don't have anybody to blame but themselves.
Well, it certainly seems like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. Because that they're contradicting themselves, completely contradicting themselves. And you kind of wonder who's in control over there, right? Like, we kind of defended Baker and his ideas and moving forward. But then this, just like you said, they step right in it again, and there's not much to defend on that. And then the other thing I would say is, I don't think the Supreme Court has to worry about seeing it again because the states are going to take them down. So, Kavanaugh can keep drinking his beers. And
beers, I like beers.
The states are all, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. It's just a hot mess. And like you say, they just keep stepping in it. Can't get out of their own damn way. And it's very awkward. It's like, that makes no sense to me. So, anyway, that was the updates we had, Steve. We're going to stay on this. I am looking to do a little more detail on NIL. Try to get that in the next couple of weeks. We're going to do a little history lesson on NIL and kind of how is it working? What are the inner workings of NIL right now? So we're going to be getting that out in a couple weeks. With that, please make sure you give us a like, give us a subscribe if you like our content. We'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.